Hey, this is Christian Buckley with another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm talking today with Rob. Hey, Rob.
Hello, how's it going?
Doing pretty well. So I think we're both preparing for winter storms coming out, but other than that, things are going well.
Yeah.
Well, for folks that don't know you, Rob, why don't you introduce yourself, who you are, where you work, where you live, all that kind of stuff.
So Rob Windsor, I live just outside of Toronto, Canada, in a place called Mississauga. And I've been doing SharePoint development for, 15 years now, more.
The beginning, pretty much.
Well, no, I started doing SharePoint stuff in 2003, but I looked at the development model at that point in time and realized I wanted nothing to do with it. But when 2007 was coming out, that's when I thought, okay, well, there's a true integration with ASP.NET, and that's when I actually started doing development on the SharePoint platform. I've been doing .NET since .NET came out, and like, stuff before that, Delphi, and even back to Clipper and DOS stuff. So I'm a consultant with PAIT Group, which is a SharePoint office consultancy out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And in addition, I do some advisory work with Seb Matthews in the UK for Provision Point. And I kind of try to split my time between consulting and training stuff. So I have recorded content for Pluralsight. I'm not doing that anymore, but I'm sort of deciding how I want to transition the training stuff. I've started streaming on Twitch, which has been interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So immediate kind of delivery, but I still do want to do like long form content, but I really haven't decided quite yet what the delivery platform that will be.
I've thought about doing some, as you're seeing more and more tech people that are using Twitch as a platform rather than just, the gamer activity. I think it's hilarious. I've had this idea, Rob, of doing these, serious Microsoft 365 kind of technical videos, walking through end user, power user capabilities, but build the content like some of these Twitchers where it's like, it's got Fortnite as I'm talking, it's Fortnite playing. And then I would go into like the demo, but on the edges, you still see there's a Fortnite game going on, and then comes back in where I'm explaining a principle and it's just Fortnite being played on the screen.
Well, that's actually interesting because I've had a conversation with a couple people about streaming on Twitch, and one of the observations that I've been given is that people who stream technical content on Twitch, not all of them, but some of them, try to fit into the Twitch sort of method of delivering stuff where, there's alerts when people follow or subscribe, and there's a lot of like emotes that go on and stuff like that. And to what level do you want to do that? Because it can be distracting, right? So, I mean, I'm just brand new with this, and I have the most basic of, themes set up, and that, so nothing like that happens in my streams yet. But I'm kind of debating, if the stream grows, should I incorporate that stuff, and to what level should I incorporate it? But I totally get you, and I kind of game. I don't have tons of time for gaming, but I do play World of Warcraft, and I do follow some World of Warcraft streamers. So I am familiar with Twitch, the platform, in terms of delivering the gaming experience on it.
Yeah, see, I guess the reason I've just not gone that direction and done that kind of live streaming, and I'll push stuff out, I'll live stream, simulcast sometimes on YouTube and Facebook, which is because the reason for that, the primary reason being is that's where a lot of the community people that we work with in the Microsoft ecosystem,
Yep,
they're more so on those platforms. That's just where they are, where they congregate, where they comment, where they consume content. But I've thought the same thing. I actually went and set up. I've got a Stream Deck by Elgato. I've got a bunch of the tools to do this. I bought a bunch of other gear for my camera so that I can have multiple screens. I've got OBS set up so I can actually do a live stream broadcast and switch angles and views and all that kind of stuff. And I haven't used it for any of this.
right.
But I have toyed with the idea of creating some videos, some simple walkthroughs, and then doing kind of the regular version, and then doing kind of the millennial, Gen Z version of that same content, and just
You're gonna like put a fake beard on and vape while you're doing it or whatever. That kind of.
I thought it'd be really funny. No, like the Fortnite idea, have
Yeah.
the stats. Suddenly there's a meme. It jumps to something else, and then there's a boy band playing, and then some speed metal thing, and I come back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird because, I've done training content. I've delivered it in many different mechanisms. So I started out with classroom training. Well, I guess technically I started out with user group presentations, right? And then conference presentations and then classroom training. And then I did the Pluralsight videos. But when I do webinars, I really dislike doing webinars, and I'm not sure why, but the fact that there's no interaction at all, it distracts
that's
me.
why so I agree, and I really like the webinar model where it's a primary person like yourself that's doing the presentation going through, but you might have 1 or 2 people that are on there having conversations, asking questions in real time. And the good thing about that, of having other people on, is because one, it helps kind of fill in the dead spots around there, but also they can be doing some of the operational aspects of reading questions from people viewing it and
Right.
serving that up, kind of categorizing the comments or the questions coming in and saying, hey, we got 3 people asking this question, rather than you having to read through.
So I think that's where Twitch comes in, and you can do the same thing on YouTube. I'm not sure what the Facebook platform looks like, but where there's an interactive chat going on during the presentation, and it depending on the size of the audience, the presenter, or me in this case, can monitor the chat and answer questions. Now, if you get a larger audience, then it might be worthwhile having a moderator or somebody who will then highlight questions that have been asked repeatedly, or something that they think is important and really is generic, or pertains to the content, right?
Right.
So yeah, that I kind of like. So, but I'm not sure what the difference is between having the interactivity and not. But I just find the one where there's not distracting. That's all.
Well, my perspective is a little more selfish. I said if it's more exciting for me to do it because I'm doing the interaction. But that's a valid point. It's like, if I'm bored giving this, because a lot of these, well, I'll speak for myself, and you can agree or not agree, but I'll go in and do webinars, or I'll record content for sessions that I've done live several times and kind of worked out some of the kinks. And then I'll go and capture that before I shelve that and move on to kind of the next the next piece of content. And so having that level of interaction, because you might, if I've got you on as a panelist and I'm giving the primary thing, you might ask questions of like, that's a great question, I've not thought of that, or so it's a good breakup of that content. But actually, Rob, I want to point something out. Like the way that you've just kind of described your path from the training, from the classroom training or user groups to classroom training to the other content, it's kind of that's a fairly common path for MVPs to kind of start out. I get that question a lot of, how would I go about becoming an MVP? And I don't want to go into the details of what that is, because there is no one way to become, right. There's no checklist of things to go and do and you become a Microsoft MVP. There's different paths for different people. But kind of I don't know if you'd add to that, anything that you would expand on that people should be thinking about or could do.
Yeah, well, so my path started in the early 90s. So you have to take that into account, that whereas today things might be different, right? But I think maybe the most valuable piece of advice I was ever given was to get involved in user groups. And I did that early in my career. So starting with Clipper and moving on to, like I said, Delphi and other stuff. I've basically been involved in user groups and the user group community my entire career. And so not only did that prep me for starting to do presentations and that side of the thing that I already discussed, but it also helped me start to build a network, right? And earlier on, that network was super important because we didn't have the internet, right? We had CompuServe forums and I guess AOL at the time, but it was nothing like it is today, where you just Google and you go on Stack Overflow, and for the most part, you can find out the answers to questions pretty quickly, right? So I think that was super important. And I would give the same advice today. Now, I know that the user group community has the in-person user group community has I don't want to
Changed
say
a lot.
dwindled, but it's changed
Oh,
for sure.
well, it has in the areas that you and I work. I mean, it has. It's diminished greatly. A lot of it has moved online, and there's also just been a growth of other, events, annual, semi-annual events, and Microsoft produced events
Right.
that you have people thinking, so why do I need to go and worry about taking 2 hours out of my afternoon to go and do this? Where I'm going in 2 months, I'm going to go see 10, 15 speakers at this event.
Yeah. So I've had this discussion with a couple of people lately around the transition from in-person communities to remote communities, right? People who do like online presentations and that kind of stuff, in as opposed to having in-person meetings. And I really think that I don't want to say it's a disservice, but it, I really think there's a ton of value, perhaps more value in the relationships that you build at in-person events than the actual content that's delivered there, right?
Correct.
Um, so,
100% agree with you. Yeah.
so I guess I would say then that if there's not a local user group that has in-person events, maybe look at SharePoint Saturdays or some other thing where you can go and meet and talk face to face with people about the technologies that you're using, because there's a lot of times where you don't know what questions to ask. And if you don't, then the whole remote thing doesn't really work, right? If you're completely unaware of certain technologies or certain things that you could be deploying or how other people are tackling problems that you're facing, then you just don't know what questions to ask to be able to get that information, right? So,
Right.
and those discussions happen at lunch or in the hallway or at the SharePoint or wherever, right?
Yep. It's interesting. I interviewed John Levesque a
Hmm.
little over a week ago. For those that don't know John, you can see him on my other series, the Microsoft Buzz Chat interview series. So he is the senior platform evangelist for Power Automate, formerly Microsoft Flow.
Right.
And so he's talking about, I mean, he does just a tremendous amount of stuff. He's got over 10,000 followers on his YouTube channel and doing some really cool content and other stuff. And he's got the pattern down. And he was talking about creating content around kind of evangelism, building community. The first thought in my mind, because my first involvement was just like you, was back, the early days of the internet was 95 or 96. Like I had done other groups like Toastmasters and that kind of stuff earlier than that. But my first user group, I believe it was the Bay.net group. So
Okay.
96, I think 96, 97. But it was huge. It was, I think, if I've gotten the years correct, it may have even been 1 year later, but a couple hundred people meeting over in a college campus, like a community college in Concord, California, in the East Bay, and a couple hundred people at least, 200, 250 people, huge crowd. Kind of difficult to get personal around that. Fast forward a couple of years though, in 2002, I co-founded, I joined and was part of the San Jose based and San Francisco based software development forum. And they had user groups, or SIG, special interest groups, and used to go to those all the time. And we were pushing to get, the SDF to move out to the East Bay, where 65-70%, I think it's like 65% of IT workers in the Bay Area live in the East Bay and would commute, a lot of them, over down around the Bay. And they just said, no, we're set along the peninsula. And so we went and formed what was called the East Bay IT Group, and then became East Bay Innovation Group, or ebig.org. And started running user groups. So that is 2002. Like I ran the communication SIG, the collaboration SIG, and also the startup entrepreneur SIG. And I did that for years. But you're exactly right. It's like I made connections, made relationships, like with people that I met through those that were regulars at the meeting that I maintain today.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so it's the technology changes. It's always going to change. But if you don't have those relationships and build out that network, who are you going to go to for questions? Who are you going to go to share ideas with and collaborate on? And
But I think so.
I think that's what's lost.
Yeah, so that's super important, and also opportunities, right? Like for the last 20 years, every single opportunity I've had in terms of like work has come from my relationships that I built through community, like either conferences or community, right? I haven't gone and looked for stuff. I haven't submitted a resume. I don't even know the last time I submitted a resume for anything. It's always been something that happened because I knew somebody and they were looking and I was looking and it worked out, right? And I would say even over my entire career, at least 3/4 of the jobs that I've gotten, or the contracts that I've gotten are because of relationships I've made through community or conferences.
Yeah, the other side of that too is that when somebody has asked for a resume, I automatically don't take them seriously. It's like you approached me because of my, the content, because of my position within the community. You've
Right.
heard of me, you saw me speak, you said, hey, this would be great, but we need to see a resume. It's like, yeah, go away. Or I mean, the other answer is just like my LinkedIn profile. That is my resume.
Yeah. And today that's really right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what stuff are you talking about, presenting on now? Kind of what are the topics that have caught your fancy?
So I do a lot of SharePoint framework stuff. I have a few talks that I do around SharePoint framework, Microsoft Graph, and Azure stuff. Microsoft Flow, a little bit of Microsoft Flow. So I'd say most of my focus is SharePoint framework. But even today, like SharePoint framework, it's not just SharePoint anymore, right?
Right.
Today that includes Teams. It does include Azure, and which means that or the Graph, which means you've got to know a little bit about Azure authentication. So it's hard to say today that you kind of just focus in one kind of narrow area, because everything is interrelated, right?
Right. Well, it's but I guess my follow-up question to that is like, but what is it that has you really excited? Like, what's the what's the thing that I don't know, the announcement over like the last year that you're like really passionate about?
So I don't know if it's actually a recent thing, but I'd say the thing that I'm most interested in right now is like Azure Functions and how to incorporate that into the development process that I'm using. That was actually the topic of one of the Twitch streams that I've done, is how to do Azure Functions that integrate with SharePoint framework that use delegated authentication, so the user credentials flow through to the Azure function.
Mm-hmm.
And just exploring more, I guess Azure and the Graph are the kind of areas that really, in terms of learning, that I'm most focused on. But if you go to my Microsoft To Do, in the stuff to learn section, I think there's like more than 15, 20 items, right? So there's a lot of things that I would really love to just, go on the proverbial island by myself with the, of course, fiber internet connection, and just be able to really, really learn.
It's very popular in the islands to have that fiber internet connection.
But just basically isolate myself off and have a chance to really just focus on learning stuff. So
it's interesting. I was just going through my OneNote yesterday where I was finished an article and was working on some client content, and I use it every once in a while. I'll go through and I'll use it as my catch-all for content and ideas. And
right.
Sometimes it'll just be like 2 or 3 bullets with a link to an article. And I found something that I linked. It was in 2012. I'm like, yeah, that's not so up to date. I'm going to delete that item.
Right.
But I'll do the same thing. I have kind of mine. I'll constantly reprioritize. And if I see themes that are coming up, one of the first places that I'll go and research about writing an article is within my own notes.
Right. So for me, it's generally like, just in time learning, right? So I know I'm going to need to know something for an upcoming contract, or we're in negotiations or discussions with a client about something, and I know maybe I don't absolutely need to know it right now, but I might need to know it, and if I have time, I'll do that. So that's kind of how I prioritize my learning. is really on what I think potentially I'm going to need to know for upcoming contracts. But in the absence of that, like logic apps, there's one that I would love to spend some time, and really kind of focus on and learn and understand the difference between logic apps and flow. That's an area where I would just love to pick that out.
I'm
It's
having to
not
learn
something I
about that.
really
I've
need to
got
know right.
two clients, same thing. It's like I'm learning about logic apps right now just because it's relevant with two of my clients.
Yeah. So, but I've unfortunately, I have 2 or 3 places where I keep that information. Sometimes it's bookmarks in my browser. Sometimes it's Microsoft To Do. Sometimes it's just sticky notes on my desk. A little analog,
Yeah.
going back and,
For those on screen, I'm like, hold up. I was like, I'm a list guy. So I have,
yeah, me too.
like, different colors and sizes of stickies and stuff that I have. If you can see my desk down here.
Yeah.
But then I consolidate, I move it. I've got To Do that's open on my screen. And then OneNote. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've never really adopted OneNote, but To Do I have. And
What?
I know.
What?
I know.
You're not one of these Evernote people, are you?
No, I'm more paper and sticky notes. So
Yeah.
it's that, and then that goes To Do or to tasks in Outlook.
Well,
right.
I've got the spiral bind. I've got all that.
Yeah.
I
So for me,
that.
it's folders, and So.
Like analog folders. Like this.
Like that.
Yeah. You're like old school folders.
Yeah.
Yeah. Metadata that, Rob.
Now, one thing that's I found fantastic lately is Microsoft Stream. So when I'm in a Teams meeting, it's, do you mind if I record this? Because that way, if I need to go back and look at it, it's right there. Now, I've been told that there might be GDPR implications to that. But most of the people that I'm working with are in North America, so that's not problematic. But we do have some international clients where I'm just forced myself to make handwritten notes.
What almost need to do is kind of like you have the setting where you automatically know within Teams, for example, that you have external people. It's kind of flagged within the team or the channel. And to do the same, have a flag that you can manually set up that if you have people that are within, Europe, and you need to be aware of that. I don't know, just having a visual cue, just ideas out loud,
Yeah.
But
I think we all have the different way of keeping that information that works for us, right?
Yeah.
So
what works for me is when somebody European, like once in a while, somebody's like, you know what, I'd never signed up for this email, that you just sent me, which is completely untrue because you don't get added unless you've,
right.
But anyway, and then they say, send me all information about how you're using my name. And I do what a lot of smaller businesses do, which is I delete them completely from my system. So it's a non-issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's harder to do with the client, I know, and capturing information in Teams. And
it's also completely relevant when their information is sitting on a piece of paper somewhere in the although it's not their personal information. So I guess that's not important.
It's so funny. I worked as a consultant for a couple of years. One of the things I did was I audited systems and processes, especially in finance departments. I had a very large client. They were almost $1 billion company. I was auditing their accounting organization and went through, and people lost their jobs because of having things written down on pieces of paper that were sitting on their desks, and rightfully so. They were warned, there were processes in place, and they continue to abuse that. But it's in this day and age where we've moved so much forward with the digital, but it just comes down to there needs to be, that process still needs to fit in the way with the way in which we collaborate. If it's a the capture of the information that you need access to be able to work with that client, if there's not, I'm rambling on something that's spun off of another thought here, and I'll edit at this point. But it's no, I think I'll round it out this by just saying that it's we have to be much more conscious about how we are, who we're collaborating with, how we're collaborating, what we're capturing and what we're not capturing. It almost needs to be like a Miranda rights type statement, are you aware that this is what I'm doing? Well, it's kind of like you talk to your bank, any financial institution, and they say this call is being recorded for quality purposes and for records and that kind of thing. And you kind of almost need to have that statement kind of baked in when you're having these collaborative activities with external people. Yep,
absolutely.
Anyway, I know. I'll shut up on that point. But well, Rob, it's been great talking to you. Where can people find you? They want to find out more about you. They want to learn more about what you do. What's the best way to reach you?
So Twitter is probably the easiest way. So at Rob Windsor. I have a blog. So msmvps.com/Windsor. It's my blog. My brand new Twitch channel. So Rob Windsor 06. There is already a Rob Windsor, and I haven't had a chance. I don't think they actually.
If you're under 21 and you want to go find out more about Rob, then.
And my YouTube. So I do the Twitch streams that I've recorded. I put those on YouTube. I also have a bunch of other content, and that is Toronto Geek. That's a name I picked like a million years ago, and I guess nice. You can't change it on YouTube. So.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm dealing with that. Yeah.
I would like to, but it is what it is, right?
Yep. Well, Rob, really appreciate your time today, and it's great connecting. I'll see you in like a month and a half-ish, 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely. In Seattle, right?
See you in Seattle. All right.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.